In the small town of Maplewood, the law bent to the will of Chief Richard Miller, but Judge Franklin Carter was about to make it stand unyielding, even if it meant risking everything. The weight of the black robe isn't just in the fabric, it's in the history, the expectation, the solemn promise of impartial justice. I've worn it for 15 years in the Maplewood County Courthouse, and I've never once taken that weight for granted. In a town like Maplewood, a place small enough for secrets to have short lifespans and for power to concentrate in the hands of a few, that robe is more than a uniform. It's armor, and I, Judge Franklin Carter, was about to find out just how much I needed it. The problem, as it often is in towns like this, had a name: Chief Richard Miller. He was a big fish in a very small pond, a man who had worn the badge for 30 years and had come to believe the shield on his chest was a crown. He ran the Maplewood Police Department like his own private kingdom, and its laws were subject to his whims. You see, traffic tickets had a funny way of disappearing in Maplewood. If you were a friend of the chief, a cousin, someone who donated to the policeman's ball, your little speeding infraction would simply vanish from the system. It was an open secret, a grimy little perk of being in Miller's favor. But for everyone else, especially folks from the poorer side of town, or anyone who didn't look like him, the law was as unyielding as iron. I'd been watching this slow-motion corruption for years, documenting it quietly. My clerk, a sharp young woman named Sarah, had been tracking every voided ticket, every mysteriously dismissed citation. The pattern was undeniable, but Miller was clever. He kept it all just below the threshold of a major scandal, a series of discretionary decisions that were hard to pin down as a criminal conspiracy. He was a ghost in his own machine, and then he got sloppy. His son, Cody, a 19-year-old with his father's arrogance but none of his cunning, was clocked doing 60 in a 35-mile-per-hour school zone. The ticket was written by a rookie, Officer Evans, a kid so fresh out of the academy he still believed in things like equal justice under the law. Evans, bless his naive heart, filed the citation properly. That's when the storm broke. 2 days later, Chief Miller appeared in the doorway of my chambers. He didn't knock. He just leaned against the frame, filling it with his puffed-up importance, a faint, condescending smirk on his face. He never used my title, not when we were alone. "Franklin," he began, his voice a low rumble meant to sound friendly, but carrying the clear undertone of a command. "Got a minute? We need to clear up a little misunderstanding about my boy, Cody." I put down the case file I was reading and folded my hands on my desk. I kept my voice level, precise. "It's Judge Carter, and you'll address me as such in my chambers. What misunderstanding are you referring to, Chief Miller?" His smirk tightened. He hated that. He saw my position as a technicality, an inconvenient speed bump in the road he owned. To him, I was just the black man who'd gotten lucky with an appointment, while he was the real power in town, the one who'd earned it. "The school zone ticket," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "Young Evans is a little over-eager. He didn't realize who he was pulling over. I've already had a word with him. You can go ahead and make that one disappear. I'll handle the discipline internally." He said it so casually, as if he were asking me to pass the salt, as if the systemic abuse of his power was just another administrative task we both had to deal with. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. I let him stand there, waiting. Finally, I opened a drawer and pulled out a single folder. Sarah's folder. "The problem, Chief," I said, tapping the thick stack of papers, "is that this isn't just about your son's ticket. This is about the 87 other misunderstandings that have crossed my desk in the last 6 months alone. Tickets for your nephew's DUI, your brother-in-law's reckless driving, your poker buddy's repeated parking violations. They all seem to evaporate." Miller's face went from ruddy to a deep, angry crimson. The good old boy facade crumbled, revealing the tyrant beneath. He pushed himself off the doorframe and took 2 steps into my chambers, his presence suddenly feeling like a physical threat. "Now you listen to me," he snarled, pointing a thick finger at my desk. "My family and my officers are what keep this town from falling apart. We are the thin blue line. We operate under a different set of rules because we have to. We are the law here. We are above these little pieces of paper." He said it. He actually said it out loud. The very sentiment that rots justice from the inside out. He believed he was untouchable. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice as cold and even as the marble on the courthouse steps. "Chief Miller, I believe you are mistaken about your position." I picked up the phone on my desk. Miller scoffed, a short, ugly sound. He thought I was bluffing, maybe calling his own department to complain about his tone. He crossed his arms, ready to watch me humiliate myself. But I didn't dial an internal line. I dialed the direct number for the county sheriff, a man Miller couldn't control. "Sheriff Thompson, please, Judge Carter," I said into the receiver, never breaking eye contact with the fuming police chief. "I have a situation in my chambers. Yes, right now. I need you to send 2 of your most reliable deputies to the Maplewood courthouse immediately, and tell them to bring handcuffs." The silence in my chambers was so thick I could feel it pressing on my eardrums. Chief Miller stared at the phone in my hand, his face a mask of disbelief. Then he let out a short, barking laugh. It was a sound stripped of all humor, a noise of pure contempt. "Handcuffs?" he sneered, shaking his head. "For who, Franklin? That rookie Evans? I told you. I'll handle him. You've really lost it." "The handcuffs are for you, Chief Miller," I said, placing the receiver gently back in its cradle. My voice didn't waver. "You have just committed a felony in my presence. You attempted to intimidate a judicial officer and obstruct the course of justice. You did it right here, in my chambers, after explicitly stating that you and your people are above the law." His face went from red to a blotchy, dangerous purple. For a moment, I thought he was going to lunge across the desk at me. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I am this town. My family helped build the very courthouse you're sitting in. You're a temporary guest in that chair, Carter, a diversity hire. I will have you disbarred. I will have you run out of this county on a rail before the week is out." He took a step forward. I stood up, the old wood of my chair groaning in protest. We were 2 men on opposite sides of a desk, but it felt like we were on opposite sides of history. "Your threats are duly noted, Chief," I said calmly, "and they will be added to the official record." Just then, 2 county sheriff's deputies appeared in the doorway. They were big men, solid and professional, their faces unreadable. They saw the scene, the furious police chief, me standing behind my desk, and their eyes did a quick, careful scan of the room. One of them, a man I recognized as Deputy Hayes, nodded respectfully. "Judge Carter, Sheriff Thompson sent us." Miller spun around to face them, his face contorted with rage. "What is the meaning of this, Hayes? You answer to me in this town." Deputy Hayes's gaze flickered from Miller to me, waiting. This was the moment where the rule of law either held or shattered completely. "Deputies," I said, my voice ringing with the authority of my office, "I am ordering you to place Richard Miller under arrest. The charge is intimidating a judicial officer in the performance of his duties. He is to be escorted to the county holding facility. He will be processed and held pending arraignment. Is that understood?" A collective gasp came from the outer office, where my clerk Sarah and others had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Miller looked at the deputies, a wild, incredulous expression on his face. "Don't you dare," he spat. "I will have your jobs. I'll have your pensions. You will not lay a hand on me." Deputy Hayes exchanged a look with his partner that lasted no more than a second. It was a look that said everything. They were county, not city. Their loyalty was to the law, not to a man. Hayes took a deep breath and took a step towards Miller. "Chief Miller," he said, his voice firm but respectful, "please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The explosion was predictable. Miller roared, calling them traitors, swearing vengeance on them and their families. But it was the roar of a caged animal, impotent and desperate. The deputies were professional. They didn't fight him, they simply flanked him, using their size and calm demeanor to de-escalate, until the final, beautiful metallic click of the handcuffs echoed through my chambers. As they led him out, a cuffed and defeated bully, the entire courthouse seemed to fall silent. Every clerk, every lawyer, every citizen waiting for their turn in court was watching. They were watching the chief of police being led away in disgrace. It was a sight no one in Maplewood had ever imagined they would see. Miller was still shouting threats over his shoulder, promising that I would pay, that this was not over. I knew he was right about that. This was far from over. This was only the first shot in a war I had just declared. I sat down, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, leaving a profound sense of exhaustion in its wake. I had done the right thing, the only thing I could do, but the cost was yet to be calculated. Sarah rushed into my chambers, her eyes wide, a file clutched in her hand. "Judge," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "your 10 o'clock hearing. The docket just updated." I looked at her, bracing myself. "What is it, Sarah?" She swallowed hard, her face pale. "It's for Cody Miller's speeding ticket. He's pleading not guilty, and his lawyer just arrived." She paused, and her next words landed like a punch to the gut. "It's the former state attorney general, Mark Landon." Mark Landon was exactly what I expected. Expensive suit, a smile that never reached his eyes, and the overconfident swagger of a man who'd spent his life talking his way out of and into powerful rooms. He represented the system I was fighting against. The winks, the nods, the backroom deals that passed for justice among the well-connected. He saw me, and his smile widened. A predator sizing up its prey. He thought he had me cornered. The courtroom was packed, standing room only. The air hummed with attention so thick it felt like a physical weight. This wasn't about a speeding ticket anymore. This was a public trial of Maplewood's soul. I took my seat, struck the gavel, and the room fell silent. "We are here to hear the case of the people versus Cody Miller," I announced, my voice steady. "Mr. Landon, are you ready to proceed?" Landon rose smoothly. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense would like to file a motion. A motion for your immediate recusal from this case." A ripple went through the gallery. This was his move. He was putting me on trial. "On what grounds, counsel?" I asked, keeping my expression neutral. "On the grounds of extreme judicial bias," Landon said, his voice dripping with theatrical gravity. "Your Honor, less than an hour ago, you orchestrated the arrest of my client's father, the decorated chief of police, Richard Miller. You did so in what appears to be a fit of personal animosity. It is inconceivable that you could now offer my client, his son, a fair and impartial hearing. This is not justice, Your Honor. It is a vendetta. You have a clear and undeniable conflict of interest." He stood there, letting his words hang in the air, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He thought he'd checkmated me. By law, a judge with a clear bias must recuse themselves. He was using my defense of the law to accuse me of being incapable of upholding it. It was a brilliant, cynical move. I let the silence sit for a moment, looking from Landon's smug face to Cody Miller's arrogant one, then to Officer Evans, who sat ramrod straight at the prosecution's table, looking terrified but resolute. "Mr. Landon," I began, my voice calm and measured, "your argument is noted. It is also fundamentally flawed. You are correct that a judge must recuse himself if a conflict of interest exists. However, the law is not a tool for the guilty to manipulate. A conflict of interest cannot be created by the criminal actions of a party related to the case. I leaned forward slightly, making sure every person in that courtroom heard my next words clearly. Let me be unambiguous. Chief Miller was not arrested because of personal animosity. He was arrested for committing a felony, attempting to intimidate a judicial officer in my presence. He threatened me in my own chambers to make this very ticket disappear. He cannot now use his own criminal act as a shield to protect his son from the consequences of his actions. To allow that would be to create a playbook for every criminal in the state. Simply threaten the judge presiding over your case, and you can force a recusal. The law does not reward such brazen contempt for the judicial process. Motion denied, Mr. Landon. Now call your first witness. The collective intake of breath in the courtroom was audible. Landon's face fell, the smugness replaced by a flicker of genuine shock. He had played his trump card, and I had just set it on fire. The trial itself was an anticlimax. Officer Evans presented the evidence calmly and professionally. The certified radar reading, the body cam footage showing Cody's belligerent attitude. Landon's cross-examination was listless. There was nothing to attack. The facts were ironclad. Cody Miller was found guilty. Then came the sentencing. I looked directly at the police chief's son. "Mr. Miller," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room, "you were driving more than 20 miles per hour over the speed limit in a school zone. Your actions showed a reckless disregard for the safety of children. But your crime is compounded by the arrogance with which you've treated this entire process. You, like your father, seem to believe that the name Miller grants you a special status, one that places you above the simple, decent rules that the rest of society agrees to live by." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the entire courtroom. Today, that belief ends. In Maplewood, there is only one law. It applies to the son of a police chief just as it applies to the son of a janitor. There are no special rules. There are no backroom deals. There is only the law. I delivered the sentence. The maximum possible fine, a 6-month license suspension, and 300 hours of community service. And that community service, I concluded, looking at the now pale face of Cody Miller, will be spent cleaning the grounds, scrubbing the graffiti, and picking up the trash at the very elementary school whose children you endangered. A quiet murmur of approval spread through the gallery. Mark Landon simply packed his briefcase, his face a stony mask. He knew he'd been beaten not by a legal trick, but by the straightforward application of the law he'd sought to twist. In the weeks that followed, the story became legend. Chief Miller was convicted and stripped of his badge and pension. The town council initiated a full-scale review of the police department, rooting out the cronyism he had cultivated for decades. And young Officer Evans? He was promoted to detective last month. He's one of the best we have. Sometimes when I sit in my chambers late at night, I can still feel the weight of that black robe. But it feels different now. It's no longer just armor. It's a promise, fulfilled. A promise that in my courtroom, justice isn't about who you are, but about what you've done. And in Maplewood, for the first time in a long time, that promise is finally being kept.